Think about a scenario. You committed a crime and you think you'll be out of prison in a few years, but the judge slams you with a sentence of millions of years. How would you react? That's exactly what happened to some of these criminals. Their crimes were so atrocious that the justice system decided they deserved to spend an eternity in prison. Stay tuned and I'll reveal some of the names of the infamous criminals who received unbelievable sentences that will leave you in shock. Abdul Qadir Mashadipov. So there was this guy, Abdul Qadir Mashadipov, an Uzbek national who did something really bad. I mean, really bad. He executed the Istanbul nightclub shooting back in 2017. Now, this guy got what he deserved, and then some. Are you ready for this? He was handed not just one, not just two, but the equivalent of 40 life sentences. That's right, 40. And as if that wasn't enough, he also got an additional 1,368 years on top of that. Brenton Tarrant. It was a day that'll forever be etched in the minds of the people of Christchurch, New Zealand. In 2019, Brenton Tarrant carried out a heinous attack on 2 mosques, leaving 51 people dead and countless others injured. The city was left reeling from the shock and horror of the attack. But justice was served, or was it? Tarrant was found guilty in court and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That should be the end of it, right? Not quite. You see, the judge had something else in mind. Instead of just 1 life sentence, Tarrant was given 51. That's right, a life sentence for each and every one of his victims. The judge didn't reveal this at the same time as the initial sentence, leaving everyone wondering what was going to happen to the man who had caused so much pain and suffering. But that's not all. Tarrant was also given 12 years for each of the 40 attempted murder cases. But there was a catch. These had to be served simultaneously, not consecutively. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Tarrant was hit with another life sentence for committing acts of terrorism. Terry Nichols. Have you heard about Terry Nichols? He was found guilty of the Oklahoma City bombing and was handed a pretty heavy sentence. I mean, we're talking 161 consecutive sentences. That's no joke. But he received 1 life sentence without the possibility of parole for each and every person killed in the attack. Can you imagine? It's like the justice system wanted to make sure he would never see the light of day again. Alan Wayne McLaurin and Darren Benelford Anderson. In 1993, 2 Oklahoma men committed a heinous act that no one could have imagined. They repeatedly raped and sodomized a newlywed woman for several hours. The woman was left traumatized and scarred for life. Thankfully, the perpetrators were caught and sentenced to a whopping 6,475 years in prison. Justice had been served, or so it seemed. But wait, there's more to the story. In a shocking turn of events, the men appealed against their ruling 3 years later. It turned out that the trial judge had wrongly instructed the jury that a defendant is presumed not guilty instead of presumed innocent. Can you believe it? The fate of these criminals now rested in the hands of a new trial. Fast forward to 1996. The verdict was in and was not good news for the 2 rapists. The second trial brought them much harsher sentences than before. McLaurin was sentenced to 2,000 years in prison for each of the 4 counts of rape, 2,000 years in prison for each of the 4 counts of sodomy, 1,750 years in prison for abduction, 1,500 years in prison for attack with a dangerous weapon, and 500 years in prison for each of the 2 counts of robbery, 1 count of larceny, and 1 count of burglary. It didn't get any better for Anderson. He was sentenced to 2,000 years in prison for each of the 2 accounts of rape, 2,000 years in prison for each of the 2 counts of forced sodomy, 1,750 years in prison for assault with a deadly weapon, and 500 years in prison for each of the single charges of larceny, burglary, and robbery. Dudley Wayne Kaiser. This story is going to give you the chills. We're talking about Alabama's Dudley Wayne Kaiser. And let's just say he's not your average criminal. In fact, he's one of the most notorious killers in the state's history. Kaiser was sentenced to a whopping 10,000 years behind bars for the brutal murder of his wife in 1981. But wait, there's more. He was also found guilty of killing his mother-in-law and a college student who just happened to be at the same house on Halloween in 1976. Yep, you read that right. This guy has not 1, not 2, but 3 murders under his belt. To top it off, Kaiser has been denied parole 9 times. That's right, 9 times. It's clear that the justice system is not taking any chances with this guy, a young postman from Spain whose fate took a turn for the worse in 1972. This tale is full of twists and turns that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Gabriel, only 22 years old at the time, was entrusted with delivering over 40,000 letters and parcels to their rightful owners. However, something went terribly wrong, and he failed to do so. The consequences were dire, and Gabriel was convicted and sentenced to a whopping 384,912 years behind bars. Can you imagine the shock and horror Gabriel must have felt upon hearing his sentence? Yeah, I know it's insane, but wait, the story doesn't end there. As time passed, Gabriel's sentence was reduced to merely 14 years. But what led to his change in fate? Did he make a deal with the devil, or was it just a stroke of luck? Charles Scott Robinson. Meet Charles Scott Robinson, a monster who committed an unthinkable crime. In 1994, he was sentenced to a whopping 30,000 years in Oklahoma, USA for raping a child. 30,000 years, can you even imagine? But that's not even the craziest part. Get this, Charles won't even be eligible for parole until he's 108 years old. Yep, you read that right. He's been rotting in a jail cell since 1994, and he won't have a shot at freedom until he's over a century old. Othman El Nawi. Picture this. 2 terrorists are on trial for their part in one of the deadliest attacks in Spain's history, the 2004 Madrid train bombings. Othman El Nawi and Jamal Zougam are facing the consequences of their actions. You might be wondering, what could their punishment possibly be? Well, brace yourself. El Nawi was sentenced to a mind-boggling 42,924 years in prison. Can you even imagine serving a sentence that long? And his partner in crime, Zougam, got 42,922 years. That's an unfathomable amount of time behind bars. But here's the real kicker. Even though they were sentenced to spend nearly 43,000 years in prison combined, they'll only serve a maximum of 40 years due to Spanish law limitations. That means these 2 terrorists responsible for the deaths of 191 people will be free one day. Shamoy Titiaso. Let me tell you the story about Shamoy Titiaso, a woman living in Thailand who has gone down in infamy for receiving the world's longest prison sentence. Titiaso's crime? Involvement in a pyramid scheme that swindled over 16,000 Thai locals. And the punishment? Brace yourself, a staggering 141,078 years behind bars. Can you even imagine? But here's where the story gets even more suspenseful. After years of Titiaso languishing in prison, a new law was passed in Thailand that limited the maximum sentence for fraud cases to 20 years. So what happened to Titiaso? Was she doomed to spend the rest of her life locked up? Well, it turns out that even with her astronomical sentence, Titiaso was released after just 8 years due to the new law. Well, that was quite insane. But which one surprised you the most? Don't forget to comment with your thoughts. Okay guys, this is us signing off. Hope you enjoyed the video. You can drop a like to appreciate our efforts. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and make sure to press the bell icon. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, peace.